Hello everyone, my name is Chris Zona. I'm a litigation partner here at Mandelbaum Barrett. With me is Rob Scrivo, who is the co-chair of our white collar and criminal defense practice group. Today we wanted to talk to you a little bit about a very interesting case that has made its way into the news and is very noteworthy for its international intrigue and its tie-in with not only the super wealthy, but also the art and related interesting asset classes that it has, that is implicated. That case is the Wildenstein, I'll call it the Wildenstein wealth debacle. If you haven't been following this case, there was a very lengthy investigative report on it because the case is now before the French High Court, which would be much like the United States Supreme Court, in which the French government is pursuing a back taxes bill for several $100 million, and the actual estimates are going to be that it may even touch over €1 billion in back taxes. Rob, it's quite a tax bill.
Indeed. So I'm Robert Scrivo. I'm co-chair of the White Collar and Criminal Defense Group at Mandelbaum Barrett. As Chris said, I think when you're talking about those sort of dollars, it's not a surprise that the government would want to take a close look at, where these assets are and what may be due it as a result of someone passing in the estate, passing on to the next generation.
So let's just go through a little bit of a summary of what exactly is going on here so we can set the stage for some later discussions on the interesting issues that it raises. So the family here is the Wildenstein family, and this family has generational wealth. That generational wealth is in a number of different areas, from art to real estate to things like thoroughbred horses to internationally known real estate in New York City, in France, all over the world. This estate has passed through this family and created generational wealth. And where we come to a heading point is with Mr. Daniel Wildenstein and his second wife, Sylvia Wildenstein, who was 20 years or thereabouts his junior. So Mr. Wildenstein passes away, and there's some interesting points of the facts in what happens during the time he passed away. He's in a coma, but suffice it to say, he passes away, and his two children from his first marriage, Guy and Daniel, allegedly approach Sylvia and ask her to sign certain documents. Those documents are purportedly a renunciation of the inheritance that she was due. Now, there are some factual allegations that Guy and Daniel told her that their father died in financial ruin and that he was going to pass on that debt to Sylvia, and that if she didn't sign this paperwork, then she might be on the hook for millions and millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in debt. So Rob, just listening to that with your extensive background, what sort of legal implications would that fact pattern at that point bring up for you?
Yeah, so I do, Chris, thank you for that summary. I think it would bring up a number of things. It goes back for me to a torts professor that I had in law school who would tell us, as he presents a factual scenario, who can sue whom for what and why, right? And then when I chose to practice in the area of criminal prosecution first and defense, I think about what actions can the government bring as prosecutors against whom and for what, right? So I think the scenario that you raised, the factual underpinnings, generate probably a cross-section of both criminal and civil law, right? You indicated that their father's on his deathbed. The sons, who are presumably due to inherit under the estate, approach his second wife, so not their natural mother, to get her to renunciate her interest in the estate. Okay, and depending upon those representations or misrepresentations as they may be, those could create both civil and potentially criminal liability. Civil liability, perhaps in undue influence and misrepresentation, even fraud on the civil end, but potentially fraud on the criminal end as well. I think anytime an individual makes a misrepresentation or creates or reinforces a falsity with respect to value or property on the state side, would lead to crimes like theft by deception. On the federal side, if the feds were to pursue this, and depending upon how the scheme or artifice was done, whether through mails, for example, or through wire, which is more commonly used today, could create potential criminal liability under the mail fraud or wire fraud statutes, and under our federal statutes.
So yeah, so as you can tell, there are some very interesting issues, and that just is the tip of the iceberg in this case. And Rob, thank you so much for that synopsis. Now, as we move forward, Miss Wildenstein continues to live her life. She's able to, enjoy the benefits of her deceased husband's lifestyle, but sooner or later, the items that she was so accustomed to start to be taken away, and come to find out it's by Guy and Daniel, who are slowly repossessing the materials of the estate, allegedly. And what does Miss Wildenstein do? Well, she finds herself an attorney in France, and that attorney tries to assist her in finding what exactly this estate even looked like, because Miss Wildenstein was married to a very wealthy man, but she didn't make it her business why he was so wealthy, or how exactly he had accumulated that wealth, or where it was stored. And as they begin to unravel the mystery of the Wildenstein fortune, they start to find things like massive collections of art held in free ports, huge real estate holdings held across the world that were either bought or sold or held through shell companies or tax trust, foreign tax trusts. So much so that the French government begins to take an interest. And unfortunately for Miss Wildenstein, she passes away, and her claims, or her probate type claims that we might call it here, to the inheritance pass with her. The government, however, does not have such a problem, Rob. As you and I both know as former prosecutors, the government's claims generally don't pass away, and especially when it comes down to repoing money that's owed to us. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly on the criminal end, liability would go away against Mr. Wildenstein and Mrs. Wildenstein, so to speak, when she passed, but the government's going to be coming looking for their due. That's what we say, the tax man has cometh, or so I would think that they would certainly be looking to recoup any monies that may have been due the government upon the passing of Mr. Wildenstein and Miss Wildenstein. And if the sons played part in that deception and hiding assets from the government, well, they may stand, to face a serious criminal investigation, in addition to potential civil liability as well.
Well, the Wildenstein family is not a newcomer to facing potential criminal liability for tax evasion or tax sheltering or tax fraud. Obviously, the analogs under French law, but they have managed to make it through several tax cases as if they were bulletproof. They were acquitted of any liability, I believe, in 2017, again in 2018. But, Rob, as you know, and as you mentioned, that the tax folks don't usually give up easy, especially here where they're looking to recoup hundreds of millions of euros, if not billions of euros. And that case now is before the French Supreme Court, so the highest court, to determine whether or not the estate here has a slew of potential back taxes and criminal penalties. So Rob, as a former prosecutor, as a former assistant U.S. attorney, what sort of tax-related criminal liability might there be for a family like the Wildensteins, where they're potentially moving assets with offshore trusts, they're moving assets like capital assets without paying capital gains, they're engaging in private sales or using free ports, or areas where customs or duties may not be due, and they're passing things along and using those assets to buy, things like real estate in the United States.
Chris, I think you just, as you summarized that, you kind of gave me the indications of what would be certainly just garden variety tax evasion. Of course, I'm applying the laws in this country, and we don't know, the French laws, but I imagine they have similar laws on their books. So you would see tax evasion. You have to be concerned and pay attention to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, again, applying our government's laws. And as you indicated, there's a lot of money at stake. This is, I mean, these are game changers. You know, there's those individuals from time to time, and you come across that even move out of states that affect the taxes. When Tepper was
Steve
Tepper moved out of New Jersey, multi-billionaire, now owner of the Carolina Panthers, and he made his residence, I think North Carolina would make sense. It affected the tax, collection of taxes in this state at that level. What you're speaking about here and what we're addressing for the Wildensteins, I see it as similar. If their estate is that large and you're talking about, massive art collections, real estate, and the like, the government's going to be leaning in on this one, to say the least. And it sounds like they certainly have.
Well, as you can tell, everybody, this is a very interesting case. It obviously brings about the international intrigue that we see in movies like the Thomas Crown Affair, where you have famous art thieves, and other movies, the James Bond lifestyle, where you have these super wealthy that most of us only dream of even glimpsing. It seems here that Sylvia, in pursuit of what she just wanted to be a fair distribution of her inheritance, really unraveled what the courts are calling a potential criminal enterprise of the Wildensteins' wealth conglomeration, and that these assets may not even be known how far and wide they are, but over the coming weeks and months and potentially years, as this percolates finally through the French court system, we'll probably finally find out just how wide this asset collection is, or at least allegedly is, and how much the French government may be getting in terms of hundreds, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars over, generations of non-paid taxes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you kind of, as we go through this story, I think about the different disciplines that it touches, right? Tax, estate and trust work, potential civil litigation, criminal litigation, investigation. And it goes back to, for me, one of the reasons why I chose Mandelbaum Barrett, because of its sophistication and experience in various areas, knowing that we can bring in a tax partner, CPA, who can help us do these things, right? I mean, one of the things that I'm not particularly good at is crunching the numbers, but knowing that we have a partner in Marty Hauptman who does, gives me great comfort to handle tax fraud cases. Whereas if we didn't have that level of sophistication, probably ones we'd take a pass on. Having estates and trust, group with the depth of knowledge that they have and the sophistication that they have, again, if we're pursuing this case, let's say, or defending this case rather, having the people with the knowledge base that they do, gives me, and I think gives both of us, great comfort in handling the matters that we do, for the criminal litigation that we handle and investigations.
And absolutely, and it also, I think, helps alleviate some of these difficulties, having partners like Sean McClelland, who would be able to come in and assist a client in actually putting together an estate such that, what happened to Miss Wildenstein here may not happen. Mm-hmm. So as you can tell, having a full service law firm is an incredible asset for you if you're looking to avoid some of the catastrophic effects that could happen as you're going through just life in general, and the trials and tribulations that we all face. Thank you very much for joining us.
So true. Thank you.